Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive Perspective. There's always a blowback to wars. There's a blowback to British foreign policy. We never learn our lessons. The reality is we do it over and over again. Well, there's blowback on the streets of London and certainly across Britain. There's a real tension building up around the war on Iran, a war which is clearly a war crime and illegal in every aspect. But it's now beginning to spill onto the streets of Britain. And this particular program has been triggered specifically by an incident that happened outside Downing Street this week, in which a British citizen, an Iranian by birth, was stabbed, violently attacked, assaulted, stabbed when he was peacefully protesting outside Downing Street. The question was why these very violent organizations are allowed to turn up to demonstrations which are peaceful. That's one question. Of course, the legitimate right of organizations to demonstrate. But why is the British police doing such a bad job of really taking care of this particular flashpoint? They know perfectly well that there's a huge set of emotions and tensions going on. They know the organizations that are involved, yet time and again what we're seeing is violence.
Basically, he said he was showing the video of the suspect that he was attacking the victim, and then the police said that he has a knife and we're gonna search him.
Why you arresting him?
Why you arresting him?
Why you arresting him? Why is he arrested? What he has done to them? Why you arresting him?
People
just sustain it.
Get back.
No, like people were stabbed, and the police, rather than arresting more of their side, the side of the Zionists, the side of the genocide supporters, they're arresting more of our people on this side. Shame on the police, shame on the Metropolitan Police. This is part of the environment of hate. They have allowed for 3 years, for 4 years they have allowed Iranian, Shahi, Zionist, genocide supporters to come out of places of worship and attack Muslims. Shame on them.
We've seen the firebombing of the Islamic Centre of England, for instance, in Maida Vale. We've seen individuals attacked in peaceful Ashura gatherings here in London. We've seen also the Iranian embassy assaulted, people climbing up, putting flags and generally misbehaving. There seems to be a trend. It's not isolated to this particular nation, i.e. the issue around the war on Iran. The police has been getting it wrong for quite some time. And I'm going to go into not only the police, but also these organizations and what happened particularly on this recent occasion when Mr. Mohammed Raza was essentially attacked and wounded by two gentlemen, I think, with knives. So Hos Shafi is with us. Hos is ostensibly a member of the Workers' Party Leadership Council. Welcome, Hos. And I've also got Nili Brook, who's a journalist who's been working actively in the field of, I guess, most of this kind of pro-Palestine, anti-war movement, but also lately she's set up something called Iran's Resistance Rising, I believe. So that's an organization that she represents. In the studio, I have the pleasure of welcoming Raza Qasim, no stranger to myself, and in terms of Islamic Human Rights Commission, was there on the day of this incident. You were chief steward or one of the major stewards there and actually were witness to it. And also we've got Dr. Marzia Ansari, a lawyer who's practiced in Iran and is also now on the cusp of becoming officially somebody who will practice the law in Britain, a fascinating crossover. So a really interesting panel and some great people. But I'm going to kick off, first of all, with you, Hos, because I want to ask about Mohammed Raza and his two children. His kids were with him when they were attacked. What happened? What's going on now? What's his condition?
So I can say that he wasn't with his kids, and his kids were nowhere near there, because ever since the tube attack that took place against him, he's left his kids back home. He's learnt his lesson to not take his kids with him. So
he was attacked before this as well?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he was in June during the 12-day war. He went in front of the embassy and confronted those Pahlavi cult people and said to them, you know, you're disrespecting the country. You're supposed to be Iranians. And about 20 of these people jumped him and just smashed the living daylights out of him. They smashed the living daylights out of him. And not a single person's been prosecuted for that. Not a single person, even though it was videoed by them and it was turned into a laughing stock of, we beat this guy up, as if, you know, they're heroes, that they, you know, 20-handed attacked one guy and, you know, smashed him to pieces. So that's happened before. Then there was the incident of him trying to walk home from an event with his kids, which has gone absolutely viral, where they've just called him all sorts of names. And worse than that, and I'm getting the evidence of videos these people have sent and voice notes they've sent to him saying that they're going to rape his 4-year-old daughter.
Goodness me.
I mean, it beggars belief that these people have got that kind of level of intimidation. So, and anyway, I'll let you ask another
Yeah,
question.
that's I mean, right now, is he out of hospital? And what did the police say to him? Have they arrested anybody in this instance?
As I understand it, the police were trying to pin the fight on him, and like he started it. Reality of the matter is he was attacked from behind by people with knives. They stabbed him, and the information I've got is that he didn't go down from being stabbed, and he fought back, very well, because he was able to, because you know, some people's adrenaline gets to them, and he defended himself, and that's all it was. He defended himself against those people, which is why when you saw those two attackers, one of them, his nose was absolutely bloody, and I mean, you can see where the knife wounds are. You know, there's a knife wound in his back, there's a knife wound in his left arm, there's a knife wound on his left upper arm, and as I understand it, after talking today, that he's actually going to have an operation on his left arm, because, you know, it's not going to heal by itself. And obviously the gash across his stomach, which is, you know, that went viral around the world, what they did to him with that. So, and two of them set on him.
Well, absolutely, absolutely horrendous. I'm going to come to you, Raza, because you were there as a chief steward. What do you recall of the incident and what happened in the aftermath as well?
I think what we're seeing here is the all of that's been described. I didn't witness any of that, but what I did see was him being guided to the floor, to sit down on the floor by the police, and those two people being on the side. What astounded me was the fact that the police were more concerned about managing us as stewards and trying to control us, and trying to rather than recognizing that as stewards we have a responsibility towards the people who have come for the demonstration, and we have a right to know as to what is actually going on and seeing it. And what was even more astounding, that 50 meters down the road there was an ambulance standing there, and I was saying to the police officers, why is there not the ambulance people coming to deal with this particular individual and sort out everything that's actually going on, so that the paramedics could actually deal with it? And they were saying, oh yes, we're calling someone and we're doing this, that or the other. They seemed to be very little kind of understanding of what had happened. It was a moving situation, and they weren't even aware whether the people who had done the attacks had actually been caught or not caught. But as has been said, that was clearly the case, that there was that taking place. There were also some, I think, characters who were involved in actually still continuing to threaten. I don't speak Farsi myself, and apparently in Farsi to myself as I was trying to organize it, and it was two women, and it seems to be that they might have been in cahoots. So what has actually been said, and this needs to be looked into further, whether they were mischief making and actually indicated that gave potentially false evidence about what had actually gone on. And one of the things that we had talked about, and we've talked about over many years with the police, is about doing the risk assessment in the right way. So you take into account and you don't see things as a threat from the people who are pro-Palestinians and so on and so forth in the way that they go about it. And it is problematic that they are still viewing us through that lens of racism that has been known for decades, that systemic racism that has existed within the police for decades and has been coming out over a period of time. And these women were being listened to. They did not have someone who was an interpreter, a Farsi interpreter, that standard practice that we had said that they should have, so that even in recent protests over the last couple of years, I've directly spoken to Silver Command and Gold Command and raised those issues as to why there is no Farsi interpreter to interpret how they're swearing, how they're threatening in Farsi, directly at individuals, directing those threats and threats to kill at religious scholars, ulama, and so on and so forth. And that's been a pattern that's existed over a period of time, over the recent period of time. And I think that all plays into that systemic racism that has existed for decades in terms of the way that the police have been managing these kind of protests.
Well, they're good at managing 80-year-old vicars and blind people on the Palestine protests, and they seem to go in very, very hard. Here, Nili, you've been at a lot of these protests, if not most of them, as far as I know, and you've seen what the police behavior has been like, and you've seen what these anti-Islamic government protesters or these campaign groups, what they're up to. What's your take on it, objectively speaking, looking at the way policing has been done around this whole issue?
It was certainly better on Al-Quds Day because they kept us separate. But yeah, I was quite shocked when I turned up to the rally on Wednesday, and there were a load of Zionists there, which we weren't expecting. And there were quite a few Iranians hovering around in the background who were quite scared, and we all sort of gathered and crossed the street and joined our group. But I don't know if people have seen the Shaw Theatre protests that happened. There was a protest because there's a Israeli fundraiser held at the Shaw Theatre, and there were Palestinian protesters there, and they had what looked like 30, 40 policemen for unarmed protesters. For one of them, they were just swarmed by police. It was quite incredible. And they're no threat. They're no violent threat to anyone. It's very political, the way the police are being used in that incident. But when there's an actual physical danger to people, to British citizens who are peacefully rallying, where are the police? They just weren't there to protect us at all. And actually, there were two young guys. So I covered the rally on Wednesday, and I've just recently, as you said, Mohsen, I've started a group, and I've got a YouTube channel related to that called Iran's Resistance Rising. So I recorded the events of that day, and two young guys Iranian guys were arrested on our side, who were no threat at all. I think they were just hanging around trying to say what happened to Mohammed, who was stabbed. And then the police jumps them, and I've got a video recording of that. They were, completely innocent bystanders. So I don't know what's happened to those two young guys, but it's just very, very scary. The people on the violent side, the Zionist side, supporting the Pahlavi regime, these people need to be investigated. Like Reza was saying, there's loads of CCTV camera footage around there, so they should be really looking into that and prosecuting these people. And a lot of them will be criminals, I imagine. I don't think it's anything innately problematic with one time a Palestinian protester came up to me and said, "What's the problem with Iranians that you have these royalist protesters that we don't get?" And I'm like, well, it's the funding of it. It's there's been a campaign to divide Iran that goes back certainly throughout the Islamic Republic history, but I'd say there's always been a campaign to divide Iranian people. So I wouldn't say there's something wrong with Iranian politics or the Iranian identity. It's the way that colonial powers have been using that for their own benefit, and we really need to start investigating all of this and exposing it and looking at the financial paper trail.
Well, I've started doing a bit of homework. I did a little bit a few months ago, and then I, of course, because of this program, I did a bit more digging, and I can say for sure that one of the most prominent organizations is called Lion Guard of Iran. And it's described as an Iranian anti-regime group based in the UK, which has organized counter-protests against pro-regime marches in London. There's Stop the Hate, a Jewish-led campaign group. There's United Against Nuclear Iran, which is another organization with a significant presence. The National Secular Society is another one. And of course, not to mention clandestinely, the MKO, which is was a proscribed terrorist organization up to 2012, certainly in Britain. But magically, they've been let loose. I also started doing a little bit of digging on Iran International, a media outlet, which was notoriously funded, and it's been proven that it was funded by Saudis initially up to 2000. I think it was launched somewhere around 2016. And then they were actually, I think they were banned here in Britain. Essentially, they were kicked out because of activities that were terror-related. And then, mysteriously, they've been smuggled back into Britain. They're based here in Park Royal, and they essentially are allowed to incite violence in Iran. It's quite clear that they're pro-Pahlavists. They promote the so-called prince, the Shah's son, who's out in the US. They are also constantly putting propaganda which is against Iran. And they were also very much implicated in the protests that took place in Iran and the violent riots that took place in Iran. To what extent is British soil being used to incite violence using these kinds of Iranian media outlets? Well, you're a lawyer in Iran. You've been a lawyer in Iran, Marzia. What do you make of all this? These organizations that are openly allowed to sort of operate and are now becoming violent here on these streets. And we know from the riots and the clashes we heard about in Iran prior to the war, the first phase of the war, were instigated quite clearly, it seems now, by Mossad and by the CIA, and there were operatives in Iran who were turning peaceful protests against the economic situation into riots, into killing, into an opportunity for regime change, something the Americans themselves are openly now gloating about that they were behind. As an Iranian citizen, as somebody who's here in the UK, as a lawyer, what do you make of all this?
Well, actually, I have written to MPs many times, and I have suggested some amendment to the legislation. One of them is very crucial, is that they need to investigate about dangerous groups outside of the country and ban them here in the UK. Well, actually, MKO is one of them, but Pahlavi and the fact that they are chanting Savak, they need to know what Savak is. Savak was an organization in previous government, Shah regime, that they were inciting violence and they were proudly saying that we are raping people in prison. It does not go with English culture. It does not go with British values. And those people are coming inside this country and they are so proudly coming here and harassing us and publish the video. Oh, do you see what I have done to this girl? And I have submitted all of those evidence to Home Office. And I said, this is the description of being a terrorist organization. And even they do not even understand that this is the act of terror. What they do, they found Iran International and other of them, they found Britain is a safe place to commit the act of terror outside of the country. Whereas according to Terrorist Act, even the act is outside of the country, they can still be proscribed here. It's like Hezbollah, Hamas. You have proscribed them because of something outside of the country. If you see Tommy Robinson's ex, he keeps saying that burn police officer in their face. This is outside the country, yes, but this is an act of terror. You cannot say this stuff. And then most of Pahlavi supporters you see in Iran, they are publishing the information of pro-regime, like people that they are staying with Islamic Republic of Iran, address and everything, go and kill them, and they teach them how to do that. This is the act of terrorism. And I have written many times to the Home Office that you need to recognize those sort of organizations. One of them is this organization. And in the petition that I have published, I have explained like over 20 of violence that they have committed. And the fact that they don't even understand, this is their mindset is not going to change. I think there is one solution to that. They need to get proscribed as a terrorist organization and to be removed from the UK.
That's interesting. I'm going to come back to and dig a little deeper on that.
Yeah.
Hos, you're in the political field. 500 MPs, I'm told, or near enough, have got associations with these kinds of MKO type Iranian outfits. While at the same time, you've got many of these. You've got the IRGC, which is part of the Iranian military, essentially, is being put forward for prescribing. And as you mentioned as well, there's not an even playing field going on here, is there? I mean, these MPs like Bob Blackmore, for instance, I think is Bob Blackman. Sorry, he's definitely amongst those who are very strong supporters of the MKO, and yet the MKO was proscribed by Britain. What's made some of these anti-Islamic Republic outfits halal and legit now? How are they so kosher all of a sudden?
At the end of the day, those people are useful idiots that are used against the Iranian government. They were the ones who were based in Iraq to fight against the Islamic Republic during the times of the Iraqi war. Then when Iraq was changed, they were all moved to Albania. They all live over there, and they've all got computers, and they are effectively a front of empire versus Iran. And the 500 MPs, I'm shocked it's not more actually, because they are all aligned with Western deep state organizations, which is the influence of Israel over British politics, much in the same way as it in America, much in the same way as it is in Germany and France, where if you say anything, you automatically either get the police beating you up in Germany, or you get things like Palestine Action, which is being prescribed. Everything that's being done here is being done on behalf of a foreign nation, and that foreign nation is the nation of Israel. That is why they're doing it. I bet you from that 500, almost all of that 500 will be friends of Israel, whether they're Labour, Tory, Liberal Democrat, Reform, are all they are the best friends of Israel. They're not the friends of Israel. They're the best mates of Israel. So we're occupied. As a country, we're occupied by a foreign power. And that foreign power has seen fit to drag our nation and make us accomplices in genocide, which is what's happening in Gaza, in the bombings of Lebanon, in the bombings of Iran. They don't do anything. All they do is sit on the sideline and support whatever the will of Tel Aviv is. Whatever Tel Aviv wants done, they do it. That's the world we live in. And anyone that tells you otherwise, is basically a conspiracy theorist and an anti-Semite at the same time.
Well, there is a clear link to the Zionists. Benjamin Netanyahu himself has praised these organizations. There's been incidences where they've engaged with him. They've actively connected. We've actively seen Zionist flags, Israeli flags, essentially, at these marches that they organize. So it's also now rumored, and I don't have evidence for this, but there was a strong indication that the Saudis stopped funding Iran International, and actually the Israelis directly took it up, or certainly some of the sponsors linked to the Israeli cause are even sponsoring these outfits. Now, our government knows this. What's their responsibility? I mean, if there are outfits here, I mean, let's say if it was the Muslim Brotherhood. You remember there was a huge hue and cry about Muslim Brotherhood and its connections with movements in Egypt and how they wanted to proscribe them at that time. And then the MCB was also roped in because they were accused of Mr. Tamimi being involved with Muslim Brotherhood. So when it came to these Muslims, whoever they are, I mean, I'm not a great fan of the Brotherhood necessarily or against them, but the fact is that it seems as though it's one rule for one and another rule for other. These Israeli-linked outfits that are shouting for regime change in Iran, they're not going to get the same treatment as the Palestinian fraternity got, are they?
So we live in a two-tier world where the chosen people are higher than the rest of humanity. We are the goy, they're in charge. Iran International is actually run by Israelis. It's not run by anybody else, and anyone that tells you otherwise is lying to you. They are funded directly by Israel and no one else but Israel, because all you can do is watch who is their target. There is no news. There's only attacks on Iran, only attacks on the Islamic Republic of Iran. There are no news stories whatsoever other than full attacks on Iran. There's never a good story that comes out of News International, unless obviously in their mindset the good news is that Sayyid Ali Khamenei was killed and they had a party for themselves.
Well,
who is the implacable enemy of Iran? Israel.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
that's their propaganda mouth.
There's allegations which are verified, I think, in many ways, of the capture of British Parliament by the Zionists and many other institutions. But I mean, they'll argue that that's nonsense. That's just conspiracy theory. Nili, there's a report here from the Mail that I don't normally read, but here we go. Iranian protesters marching through the heart of London chanted "Trump and Bibi, thank you. Thank you," as they danced in celebration at the death of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. So these guys are literally sort of fanboys of Bibi Netanyahu and Donald Trump, who perpetrated a war crime on Iran, not once, but twice already, at least, if not a lot more. What have you witnessed in terms of these organizations and the way they behave? Because I have got evidence, first-hand evidence, that they fired Molotov cocktails, or threw Molotov cocktails rather, at the Islamic Center of England, broke their offices, destroyed the building, certainly the front of the building, tried to mount flags, their Persian lion, motif flag, which they sort of push around. And essentially the police, after that as well, I've witnessed people outside the Islamic Center beaten up badly while in police custody. There's actually video footage which hopefully we'll be able to show, where an individual is being led away by the police, and around about 40 or 50 of these Pahlavists, or these anti-Islamic Republic of Iran protesters, or thugs one might call them, literally were throwing bottles, punching, kicking, and the police had this guy's arm. So they were holding on to him, so he couldn't fight back properly, even if he wanted to defend himself. They weren't pulling any buttons out, not trying to stop these guys in any substantial way. And he was getting the living daylights kicked out of him, just like Mr. Mohammed Raza we were talking about at the beginning of the program. So there seems to be this consistent trend of the police, the British establishment, and their link up and their fetish for the Zionist state of Israel, and this business of regime change in Iran. Is this all linked? Am I asking too much to say actually this could be quite coordinated in terms of the deep state in Britain, in terms of the Zionist regime itself, in terms of the police? I'm beginning to sense some sort of coordination here, potentially.
Yeah, I'd say it's very obvious that the government here and the police, they're all against the Iran, essentially, in the Islamic Republic. I think we all know that. We all know that in the Palestine movement as well. I think what we need to do now is make the opposition or the anti-war movement, the Palestine movement, we have to have a stronger solidarity and a narrative that includes the Iranian voice, not just the anti-regime voice. Now, I feel that is the prominent voice within the movement. There was quite an interesting discussion I saw the other day between Miriam Francois and Loki. I don't know if anyone saw it.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, so Miriam was saying to Loki, she's concerned that the grievances of Iranians are going to be erased. So she was saying it's the Iranian government, the system there, it's their responsibility to deal with those grievances. But what's happened is those grievances it's essentially hatred, that the only narrative that comes out of them here is hatred for the regime, right? And I would say to Miriam, I would like to expand on her questions and say, why isn't she inviting on people who can speak about the grievances of the Islamic Republic? Yeah, there'll be loads of people there who can talk about the sanctions and about how they suffered under the SAVAK, that was mentioned earlier on. That narrative is never platformed, and that narrative really needs to be platformed by prominent figures within the Palestine movement. And I'm sure Miriam could do a wonderful job of that. She did certainly speak to, she spoke to Narges Baghali and other people. I mean, I'd say that Narges is probably she doesn't probably fully support the Islamic Republic. She's certainly anti-war, but we need to speak to people who can defend the Islamic Republic, right? And the biggest grievance of Iran is foreign interference, and this is an ongoing problem, and it's a massive grievance, and we have to we're starting to see how deeply that goes in terms of the networks here, and organizations like Iran International. So I think it's actually our responsibility as a movement to tend to that grievance ourselves. And it's all very obvious about how awful our government is, how awful our police are. And we're going to be stuck in a loop of that until we embrace Iran, actually, I feel, and even, within the Green Party, within your party, I feel that the regime change narrative is still getting priority. I'm not particularly a Green Party activist, but my sister's involved in a lot of Green Party stuff. And when those ambulance attacks occurred, the ones that were pinned on Iran, which was complete nonsense,
That's Jewish ambulances, Jewish ambulance services that they run outside of the British government services in North London, I think it was, isn't it? That's what you're referring to. Mm.
Yeah, and they tried to pin it on Iran. And my sister, shared some of the links from people like Loki, who was saying, well, this is nonsense, and there's very good reasons for that. And David Miller as well has done a very long article about this in Mint Press, and she was just sharing those links and then being accused of being anti-Semitic. So this culture, it's very obvious to us, the Zionist, overt Zionist level, right? But we have to actually get into the sort of the neoliberal level that operates throughout parties like the Green Party. I mean, for me, it's only George Galloway's party now that seems like the authentic political party to me.
Well, Hos would agree with you.
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely. I mean, I sort of, because everyone was going with the Greens, I was like, I didn't have much faith in Zach Polanski, and the final nail in the coffin for me was that display in Trafalgar Square. A party, they were having a party whilst the bombs were being dropped in Iran. There was not one Iran flag in sight. And he said, the Together Festival, they invited me so I could, you as a leader of a party, you get your priorities right. You meant to be there fighting that motion. And also another thing to keep in mind is that Together Festival party, whatever it was, right, was organised by Amnesty International, was a big part of that. And Amnesty are very, very clearly anti the Iranian government. And they are a prime example of how instead of resolving the grievances of Iranian people, they get weaponized.
Okay, well, Raza, I know for a fact, and I've had this reported to me firsthand, many Iranian businesses have complained that these activists from perhaps Lion Guard or whatever they're called, or most of these pro-Pahlavists, or actually the MKO crowd, because they've got a slight difference. The Pahlavists want a monarchy back. The MKO fraternity and those around them actually don't want Shah. They say no Shah, no mullahs. They want neither. So what manifests, though, and we don't know who's at the heart of it, is that they seem to be people going around Iranian businesses and other communities and forcing them, coercing them, manipulating them, threatening them to put up flags, with the old the lion brand that they have, to tell them to display posters in their windows. And there's a kind of a sort of a threat to say that if you don't, then your windows will get smashed. I've had actual businesses that have said, have you come across this phenomenon?
Yeah, it is widespread. And I mean, in fact, in Germany, no less, we actually had someone being threatened, an Afghani being threatened with putting up such a flag, and he was actually killed. By some of those people who are Pahlavi supporters. So that threat of violence is there, exists, and is very much part and parcel of what should be taken into account by the Metropolitan Police when spending their resources and where they're spending them. They're very happy to spend those resources to cover Zionist areas, and you can just see that from the amount of funding that the Zionist places of worship will get, as opposed to all of the other religious groupings combined in terms of protection that is provided. The business thuggery and so on, the Islamic Human Rights Commission has actually put some information out on our website. Anyone who's looking can see how you can deal with and think about how you can protect your business in terms of what you're doing and not be stifled in what you're actually saying or what you're being threatened, that if you don't put this particular flag up, we're going to do something. So we need to put things together so that we can combine and actually put pressure that the people who are supposed to be protecting these businesses, protecting everyone, do their job, i.e. the Metropolitan Police, the authorities, and go after these people. So I think there is a real kind of thing there. And I think part of the problem in terms of the framing of the white left, Nili mentioned about Miriam Francois in terms of the conversation that she was having and the framing it within the white left. It seems as if they don't seem to recognize that Sayyid Ali Khamenei, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei himself said that people have legitimate grievances and that they could be they have every right to come out onto the streets and protest against those. So that kind of legitimate protest was even agreed on and thought as normal part and parcel of what society and civil society should be acting like. So there seems to be, that although he's now become Shaheed, that kind of concept exists within how the Iranians conduct themselves and how things actually happen within the Islamic Republic of Iran. So there is nothing, kind of grand or something new that is being said here by myself. It's something that's part and parcel, only if they care to look at what has actually been said. And there's a real problem that kind of propagandization has been internalized by the white left, which has actually created this issue that has been nearly articulated earlier, of those expressions not being able to be had. I mean, I remember when the Iraq war was happening, there were 1 million people on the streets of London before a single shot had been fired, before a single bomb had been dropped. And here we have a pathetic situation that on the day of the war, when it started on the 28th of Feb, we had called people out to actually come out and protest against the war, and we just had a few hundred people coming out onto the streets. People need to choose the right side of history. And quite frankly, those people who have not actually done that, and by not coming out in support of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And remember, Saddam Hussein had gassed Kurds in Halabja and all those kind of things. And despite all of that, the white left had mobilized everyone to actually come out. So I think there is a real kind of soul searching that needs to be done as to where the left actually stands on these kind of issues. And I think the other aspect of it, if I can come back to one of the things that was said earlier, is that what we are seeing streamed on our mobile phones today is because of the technology that exists. And we need to think back that, just imagine when there was a time when none of these technology, this TikTok, this Instagram, the social media, the cameras existed. We can go back to the Iraq War. We can go back over a period of 500 years of colonization, of European industrial scale colonization of just about the entire world that had actually taken place, where they were chopping off hands in the Democratic Republic of Congo because children had not picked out enough minerals that were required by the Belgians, or how in the 1857 the British put the heads of the mutineers along all the streets going down 3 or 4 miles in the Indian subcontinent. So we've got plethora of evidence about what the empire on an industrial scale has done. The Zionist entity has been something that, Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, talked about when he wasn't so sleepy, and said if there wasn't a Zionist entity, we would have created one, right? Because it does it. So I think we need to understand that this is all part of the empire. Even the Islamic Republic of Iran, when they're fighting, their thing isn't directed toward Israel. Professor Morandi, I'm sure everyone here would have listened to him, and he has actually talked about that our main fight, the people that we're preparing for, is not the Zionist entity. We can take them out, no problem. We're preparing for the fight that's with the USA, and they've been preparing for decades, as he keeps saying. So I think we need to understand that the Zionist entity could not exist without any of this. So what we've got to look at is the concept of empire, and really understand that there is this kind of issue going on with how they are trying to, whether the tail wags the dog, or the dog wags the tail, whichever way round you want to do it. One of them's doing the wagging and one of them's doing the leading. But ultimately, the purpose, the objective of genocide and subjugation and oppression is all being achieved regardless of who it is within the empire that's doing it, whether it's Germany, whether it's Britain, whether it's complicit, non-complicit, defensive, defensive, offensive stance, or any of those kind of gymnastics of language that are actually being employed by the different people within this empire that has existed and continues to exist and do the thing. And you've got to think about this as a mafia. And when Trump comes in, he's the mafia boss that isn't quite on message with how the mafia families work, and so therefore he's doing things that he shouldn't be doing, so the other mafia bosses aren't quite happy with him. But once he goes, or once something else happens while the empire's on the decline, these other mafia bosses that was maybe slightly not as powerful are going to continue that mafianess.
The system will continue.
Yeah.
So Dr. Marzi, I know also for a fact that the British establishment put Iranians who live here in the UK on notice. I know people in the IROB and various others were actually told to start reporting to the police. There were severe restrictions being put on them. People have been arrested, often under potentially bogus charges, just randomly, as part of a bigger tit-for-tat game, perhaps, that may be going on. But it's quite clear that several months ago, if not a year ago, there was an active campaign by the British deep state, the British government, to actually also target Iranian citizens. At the same time, of course, they're not doing anything about violence. We heard an account earlier from Hos. I've seen it myself. I witnessed it. Raza will confirm it. Probably Nili will as well. That actually the police aren't treating these quite violent, dangerous, you described it as terroristic, almost individuals and organizations, which are allowed to be let off scot-free and do what they like. No investigations, no follow-ups. You're, as a lawyer, what do you think needs to be done? You talked about proscribing certain organizations, but what would you want to see now in terms of what ought to happen to protect British public and to protect the Iranian citizenry here? Because clearly most of the people, Iranian diaspora, isn't necessarily, I'm not going to say they're necessarily political. I don't see them out on big marches. It's very small gatherings. So these people, whoever they come, could well be on payrolls and are told to come, and maybe they're down and outs, drug dealers, maybe some are very politically motivated. But I don't see that Iranian diaspora, the guys living in Kensington, Ealing, they're not the sort of people who I'm seeing at these demonstrations or getting involved. So does the police does it have a duty of care to those, Iranian British citizens here to protect them because it's going to spill over into their communities? And do they have a duty of care to the wider British citizenry to home in on what's going on in these organizations?
Well, actually, this is another thing that I have written to MPs. I didn't get the answer that I want, and I want Workers' Party to put them in agenda, actually. Because in Iran, all of the allegation goes to the CPS, and then CPS tells the police what to do and what not to do. I've explained to one of my MPs, and then they have written to the Ministry of Justice. So Ministry of Justice returned back to me in official letter, and then they said they will look into it, but I don't think they were so clear, because police officers, they are, sorry to say that, but they are just kids. You cannot expect lots from them. They have their personal opinion. They have their own problem. They want currently the government wants them to know the law, and also the army, and this and that is impossible for one person. So they need to take the burden and put it on CPS. So what is in Iran? Allegation goes directly to the CPS, and then before they charge them, there is a mini trial, and then they decide whether to charge or not. So this is something that they need to lead to be changing the legislation. I do not blame police officers one by one. I blame the legislation.
So, as an Iranian, I'm also curious, because clearly I'm beginning to make a parallel. There was a massive play made about Iran not allowing protests, Iran attacking protests. They're still peddling this nonsense about 30,000 Iranians have been killed by the government on these protests, while at the same time we've seen protesters being beaten, harassed, and kicked in Berlin, on the streets of London here as well. There's a huge hypocrisy. As an Iranian, how do you see the way that these establishments are behaving towards Iran?
Well, again, I blame Savak and previous government, because they implemented that you have the right to be violent because of your political views. And you see these people here, there are more of them inside Iran, and they think this is their right to be violent. So when there is a peaceful protest, because few of them are like that, doesn't stay peaceful. So they start to stone police, they start to put cocktail Molotov, they start to put this. And then, even in the UK, if one person starts to stab police officer, the other one can shoot. So this is like international law. You cannot say that I was killing police officer when they shoot me back, because this applies everywhere. And then, Mossad, of course, was there. The American was, of course, there. So that's why the number was so bad. And what I saw, they were brutally killing police officers.
Were you there at this time?
Well, I was in touch with lots of them.
Sure.
From inside Iran, all my family are in Iran, so I was keep getting report like what's happening. And what they were telling me that people are targeting police officer with fire, with stab. You saw lots of videos.
Over 300 were killed. We know that.
I think way more than that. Way more than that. Yeah. If they were like ordinary people, or if they were like Mossad, they were trying to incite the violence. And then every time this happens in Iran, when they shut down internet, everything goes off, because most of them were getting brainwashed via Instagram. But I was watching Instagram, I saw that the clips are extremely emotional. So you have to kill police officer.
Wow.
You will go to heaven. This is heaven. And then it's like brainwash. I was just like, what is happening? The internet must go shut. And then when the internet was shut, so everything was stopped. Yeah, this is something, that's why I'm still saying that they need to be proscribed outside of the UK, so we can see peace inside Iran.
Hos, what can we do about the likes of Iran International? If they were inciting violence there, of course, the rhetoric and the narrative they have is affecting these people who are here in Britain. So these international media agencies who are acting in this kind of irresponsible way, encouraging violence, encouraging regime change, fomenting hate between the Iranian community perhaps as well, and obviously misinforming Western public about what Iran is all about. That's quite a big deal. I mean, they're hugely financed. I think initially when it was launched, there was talk of a couple of £100 million went into it. The staff at Iran International were paid double the fees of anybody else. And even the whistleblowers from within Iran International that I've read about were saying basically they were running an entire agenda which was basically inciting and attacking Iran in a violent way. Now, I'm saying that blowback of what these people are doing, based here in London, is beginning to manifest in London, in Britain. What should the political system, what should our police's responsibility be, and what can we do?
I just want to say that a couple of things I wanted to say. When you were speaking to Nili, you turned around and said, where's the effect of the guy who went up the flag? So you know who the person was that went up the flag? It was actually the same guy that did the stabbing.
Wow.
His name is Vahid. He is the person that went up the flag and tried to rip the flag down, is the same person. The person who was standing next to him has come to the United Kingdom 2 months ago. He's staying at a hostel near Heathrow Airport. Why is he there? So you have to ask yourself that question. And what I want to say to you, and this goes to an answer to the other part of the question that you were asking, Marzia. These people are being encouraged to come onto the streets of London because they are there as, I'm talking about the second one, not the first one. The first one is a long-time person who's been here, who happens to also be a drug addict and an alcoholic, and he likes to drink. And if you see the videos of him earlier on in the day, you can see that he wasn't even able to walk very well because he needs to get his Dutch courage up because he's being asked to go and do something. And by the way, Mohammed Raza was being targeted for that attack, okay? But that guy who's been here 2 months, what's the easiest way for you to go and get your, what's it called? Your residency and asylum and this, that, and the other? Is by saying you are the enemy to the Iranian state, the country that wants you. So what they do is they encourage these people financial incentive, as well as come and stand in front of this Israeli flag and Iranian flag, the Pahlavi one, call people names, and then what we'll do is, that's you on video, and then the Iranian government will kill you if you try and go back. So what they're doing is they're manipulating the refugee asylum system that we've got here, which is absolutely absurd, because they're actually creating or manufacturing the content that they need to make their asylum case work. I mean, the guy's been here 2 months. Why are you involved in a stabbing? Why are you involved in an operation to go and stab someone? And I want you to understand, this operation that they did on Mohammed Raza was not just something that was off the cuff. It was planned. I've got videos, which I've got coming to my house. A 2-hour-long video of a live broadcast that was done by someone who's turned around and is thinking he's talking to a closed live audience. He doesn't realize he's been recorded by someone who's not one of his friends. And I've got that evidence, or it should be with me sometime today. And these guys are organized into cliques to do these things where they, and as Nili said, she arrived there on Wednesday and there was a crowd already there. Our event was organized for 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the evening. A poster had gone up for their event from 5:30 till 8. So they're there half an hour before our events start as a counter protest. Our events are protests that are organized with permits, with, gold commander, silver commander, this and the other. These people just show up. They don't have a permit to stand there. So they do what they do. So I just wanted to give you that bit of reference.
Good, yeah, no, it's very useful.
Iran International, we can't do a thing about. They work for the British government. They are working as what's it called? As far as I'm concerned, the British government is absolutely occupied, and they'll do exactly what Israel asks them to do, as they have done in the last 2.5, 3 years. Israel has the right to defend itself. That's the echo chamber of their existence. Through that, they can get away with genocide. And Iran International works with the state of Israel. That's it. There is nothing we can do about them. All we can do is hope that Israel collapses. And when Israel collapses, Iran International will collapse with them as well.
What about Marzia's request to get involved with the Workers' Party to push her ideas around prescribing these other organizations, at least to put pressure on? Whether it happens or not, it's a different matter altogether. But do you think it's worth trying?
We don't have any sitting members of parliament, so we can't actually impact or affect legislation. I think there isn't another member or another person in political life that has carried the flag of Palestine longer than George Galloway. He went to see Yasser Arafat when the Palestinians were kicked out after the 1973 wars, where there were even more expulsions done, and when the Palestinians were in Beirut and they were living in Lebanon because they had been kicked out of their country. George Galloway was there, and every day, not every day, or every day, in fact, on Twitter, but every Wednesday and Sunday, his show is pretty much, calling out the influence, calling out all of these things that Marzia would like to see done. But so far as legislation, this can only be done by sitting members of parliament. And as we've already said, 500 out of 650 of them are never, ever willing to do anything that's going to upset the apple cart of their existence. They have a channel by which councillors who are IDF soldiers, right? We've got a councillor who is an IDF soldier. There's a picture of her with a gun, with the Israeli flag.
I've seen that,
who
yes.
served in the IDF, and she's become a local councillor. And I promise you, I give you my word, that in about 5 years' time, or the next, not this election, but the election after, she'll be put up into some safe seat because she is a servant, or is an Israeli. Just like we've got American Israelis, dual nationals, we'll have another Israeli as an MP. That is the existence we have. Until such time as the state of Israel is dismantled, absolutely dismantled from existing as it does, then expect the whole of the Western civilized society to be controlled, manipulated, and have all of our TV channels and everything else putting up all the stuff that they want to degenerate our country, to degenerate our civil society. I mean, the stuff that I see on the BBC every other day is so far away from reality. Like they've got these TV shows about, a dog's pharmacy for a dog, or medicine and insurance for dogs, and they've given it like 20 minutes on London news time. What is that dog in comparison to the lives of people that are being bombed to absolute smithereens in Lebanon that very same day? Why are you not talking about that? Because that would show Israel to be the genocidal country that it is. And what they do is they just distract you with crap to do with dogs. Like dogs insurance has gone up, and she's had a case against the insurance company.
Yeah, I get your point. Yeah. Well, Nili, Mossad are likely to be hovering around these sort of guys because Benjamin Netanyahu has declared his love for a lot of these organizations, and they've declared their love for him. We're seeing Zionist flags openly at their demonstrations. So the link is undeniable. Deep state, whether it's our own one or the American one or the Israeli one, they'd be licking their lips at this, if not being perhaps arguably behind some of this. What's in it for them if false flags and psychological operations and manipulation of these kinds of individuals who are maybe just thuggish and have got a grudge against Iran? What are the chances of them being utilized, and what kind of recourse do we have to actually be able to counter that?
Well, I mean, those kind of thugs just maintain the status quo, don't they? And it's a level of violence that probably puts people off politics. But we have to start building stronger politics. And I think the test of that is by who we include, who we incorporate. Why isn't George Galloway talking openly on panels with Jeremy Corbyn and other people in the Palestine movement? I think, like Hos was saying, we can't really do much about Iran International and the British government. It's so heavily captured. But what we can do is challenge people here, challenge their ideas of comfort, because like the dog shows you were talking about, these delusional bubbles that people live in, because these violent realities that are on our streets, people are looking at them and saying, oh, well, it's only a problem for those Iranians. But that kind of violence spreads, and it's going to start hitting people, like the economic crisis that's going to start hitting people because of the war of choice that our government is participating in. That, the neoliberal order is it's not just Zionism, it's the whole neoliberal order. It's capitalism that wants this war, and it's a war of choice. So we have to start developing a very strong anti-capitalist, inclusive opposition, and alert people to a very dark reality that's going to hit everyone, you know, about techno-feudalism, AI, you know, just even down to things like the future of our culture, the future of our music, the future of everything, really. So it really is about connecting the dots. And for me, the answer is with Iran and how we talk about Iran and how we have to start challenging everyone, not just the government, but the opposition in terms of including Iran, you know, figures like Miriam Francois. I would ask her to please platform that pro-Islamic Republic voice wherever it should come from. I'd suggest that, you know, there's plenty of people in Iran. I've got to talk with someone soon from Iran who's very articulate about the government there and about what the people experience. I've also noticed here, when I've been asked to do speeches, I've been asked to make my focus about the Iranian people and the inspiration of their bravery, you know, the human chains, etc., and not to talk about the government. And, you know, that's problematic as well. That's still trying to control our perception of the reality. You know, in Iran, there are millions of people now signing up for the IRGC because they see things through a wider lens. They're seeing things clearly, whereas we're not. You know, they're seeing the commitment of the revolutionary project in Iran. You know, I mean, it's obvious to everyone if you just look at the facts. If you look at the underground missile cities that have been built, you know, and the asymmetrical warfare, when you see how effectively Iran is fighting imperialism, it opens your eyes to imperialism and what's needed to fight it. And we haven't really got that going on here.
Okay.
This idea of sorry.
Yeah, please.
I'm just going to say this idea of a westernized people's revolution has to be challenged.
Okay. Well, powerful stuff. Iran's Resistance Rising is one platform. Workers' Party with Hos is another platform people can go to. IHRC have done huge work around tackling Shia-phobia, Islamophobia. You know, the environment of hate has been a huge thing you guys have done, taking on the police. There are many ways that we can actually get involved in putting pressure. But if you had a takeaway to give people around this whole issue, what would it be, Raza, in conclusion?
I think just following on very briefly from what Nili was actually saying about this concept of the Islamic Republic of Iran and how it's viewed and how the leadership is viewed. We need to understand that Islamic Republic of Iran is unique among nations in terms of standing up for the oppressed for a very long time. Whether it was Nelson Mandela, who called Sayyid Ali Khamenei my leader, and carrying on from there, fighting the apartheid, actively supporting the people of Palestine, actively supporting the people of Lebanon, actively supporting the people of Yemen. And it has been something that is very much part of the systemic kind of way that they actually work. Going to something very anecdotal and very small in that whole thing. I was once in Iran, and I went to a friend's house whose extended family lived in this building where they had 3 or 4 flats, all of them living one amongst each other. And the bill, the electricity bill or gas bill, was about £5 for the entire month or that period of time that they have the bills for. And I was saying, how can it be so little? And he said, they subsidize it because they want to look after the people, right? And I was thinking about the bills and the way that old people die within the Western Hemisphere because the energy bills are so high that old people are switching off their things to keep the bills down, to look after them. So there is a level of care and attention to detail that the Islamic Republic systemically has given to the people of Iran, which I was quite surprisingly shocked about, to see that this kind of level of stuff that was going on, which doesn't exist in the West, that kind of care and so on. In terms of the point about takeaway, I mean, we need to remember that this idea of the environment of hate is systemic. It exists at different levels, whether it's operating within the context of how the police go about investigating. And, you know, you could say it's become a police state ever since, and it was becoming a police state, and ever since the Prevent program came in, that has nailed into its coffin. And, you know, the illegitimate offspring is of the Stasi police is what the British Metropolitan Police, London Metropolitan Police can actually be said to be in the way that they're going about this. And we see this in the way that different police forces around the country are not taking things seriously, whether it's allowing places of worship not to be attacked if there were Muslim places of worship or to be protested against. And we see that going on regularly. But if it was synagogues or if it was for Jews, then it becomes a different kind of story where that kind of thing would actually be done in a very different way. And we need to remember that Maz Salim's, I don't know when this show is going to go out, but Maz Salim's death anniversary is coming up, and he was killed for being a Muslim by, I think it was someone from Ukraine.
Ukraine, yes.
And he was killed by that person, and it wasn't classified as anything. This was a terror attack that took place in Whitehall. It is not being classified as that. We don't see it out in the British press as being a terror attack. There would have been 24-hour coverage going on if it had been anything else other than someone who is an anti-genocide protester, a pro-Palestinian protester, anti-war protester going out. If it had been anyone else who was from the other side, however you characterize the other side, sure, it would have been a different story. And we need to really expose the hypocrisy of it and challenge how those systems are actually behaving so that they stop becoming like the illegitimate offspring of the Stasi police and actually doing something that will be protecting all of the people fairly, with due care and attention to all communities that have a right to have that protection from the police or from the official services of this country.
No, final question to you, Dr. Marzia. What responsibility does the legal profession have? We've talked about the police a lot, but the justice system, the legal system, do you think there's any possibility to push things in within that to exercise a bit more fairness, a bit more justice, and also perhaps a chance to rein in the government and rein in the police, perhaps?
Yeah, well, actually, I have recently launched a of the association, Iran-UK Allies. Mm-hmm. So we are trying to push government to get change in legislation because, you know, the general public really blame police. From the time that I've entered this country about 8 years ago, I've been involved with them a lot. And I know that, honestly, they are just so confused. They don't know what to learn. You know, this is the law, this is discrimination, this is army, this is how to arrest. How do you expect too much from one person? Whereas CPS is there, they have very professional lawyers. Some of my friends, they work for CPS. I know that they are perfect lawyers. They have to deal with this legal side and tell to police what to do, what not to do. I think this is just the only way out of this situation.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Hos. Thank you, Nili. Thank you, Raza, and of course, Dr. Marzia. It's been a fascinating discussion, and of course, we could run and run. So many dimensions. You're going to have to really join the dots yourself. Everything that's international comes home to you locally. So global is local. That's the lesson that I'm learning over and over again. We didn't learn and listen when they did it in Afghanistan. We didn't learn and listen when they did it in Iraq, nor Libya, nor Syria. Now it's Iran. And again, on our streets, we're getting the tension. We're going to get the blowback. The blowback is coming in terms of economic inflation. It's going to come in terms of all sorts of other policing, surveillance, capitalism, assertions. That's already happening, and we're going to get it in terms of individuals being stabbed and wounded and hurt. All of this can be avoided with people power. I think I still can't emphasize enough that ultimately these systems and these institutions, we're the ones who actually, we give our consent. So sometimes there's this idea of withdrawal of consent, whether it's through strike action, whether it's through pickets, whether it's through boycotting, whether it's through highlighting in the press, whether it's through actually legally tackling them. I think we mustn't despair. We must continue the struggle because this is all part of a collective struggle for justice around the world. I see no difference between the people of Iran standing up today against Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu's aggression. It's their war crimes on the Iranian people. I see no difference between that and the Palestinians that were genocided, or, for instance, women who are raped or pedophiles that prey on children within the Epstein class system. It's all interrelated, nothing to do with race, culture, creed. It's to do with evil people at the top of a system which is systemically evil, and it's a system that we ratify because we think we've got a democracy, when in reality we've got an oligarchy which actually doesn't bother about you, me, or anybody else in reality, so long as they're making money and the plunder is going on and they have power and control. They don't care who they kill, they don't care who suffers, and I don't think it's possible for anybody to sleep comfortably these days and think that they then just can get on with business as usual. There's a lot more to be done. We all need to be out on the streets. We all need to cut off our support and the supply line, which many of the people within that system rely on in order to just get richer, more wealthier, and to suppress us more. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Deep Dive Perspective. Do follow Nili. I think she has Obscenity State Media and also this Iran Resistance Rising. Follow IHRC, who have got their websites as well. Your organization, I'm going to plug that again, but I've forgotten what you mentioned just now. The one
Iran UK Allies.
Iran UK Allies, and of course, Vote Workers Party, because they're the only real anti-war party. I'm on record for saying that now. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to you, the audience. Until the next Deep Dive Perspective, goodbye.